Shalom. This is Ron Warren with the Nuggets of the Torah. This week's teaching is the second parsha of Leviticus and is called Tzav, which means command. This is also the 25th parsha of the Torah, and this parsha could also be called the parsha of diamonds. Now, what does this parsha have to do with precious jewels? Think about it. A diamond is carbon that is crystallized to the context of extreme high temperature, which could range anywhere between 900 to 1400 Celsius. It also deals with extreme pressure. Now, God's words in this parsha are like that. They do not look like much, but if you're willing to spend a little time uncovering what God has placed in them, it will bring diamonds in the rough and make it worthwhile. This parsha cannot be understood, much less appreciated, out of its context. The sacrifices fulfill 5 fundamental spiritual needs that are found in every human soul. Our first and biggest need is the gap between God's will and ours, and this is solved through the burnt offering. You know, the King James translation substitution of the words burnt offering is not a translation of the word, but it's a doctrinal interpretation of part of the translators. It's actually called in Hebrew, karban olah. That means that which goes up or to ascend. In the Septuagint, it's also called holocaust. Our second need is when we tend to appropriate or use material things for selfish purposes. We incorporate them into our identity and either turn them into idols or throw them away as useless. This is solved by the use of the grain or the meat offering. Our third need is when we look at other people, friends, family members, potential mates, business acquaintances, and even enemies, as something to use, manipulate, conquer, and or annihilate for our own purposes. And it's the peace offering that is the approach that is used to assist human beings to overcome the issues that arise in personal relationships. Our fourth need is the result of the distance between the breaches of the contract of the covenant between us and God. The sin offering empowers human beings to bridge that distance and overcome the inefficiency that they were in. And our fifth need is the stress that results from carrying heavy loads of shame, dishonor, guilt, embarrassment, and fear of exposure. And it's the guilt offering that takes the load from our shoulders and disposes of it. Yeshua fulfilled all of the 5 fundamental spiritual needs when he fulfilled the sacrifices. Let's take a look at the order of the sacrifices. In last week's parsha, you dealt with the order of the burnt offering, the grain offering, the peace offering, the sin offering, and the guilt offering. This week's parsha, the order is the burnt offering, the grain offering, the sin offering, the guilt offering, and the peace offering. Why the difference? Last week's parsha, Vayikra, was a holistic catalog informing the children of Israel what offering to bring, and this week's parsha, Tzav, serves as an instruction manual, which deals with the order according to the holiness of the offering. And it's teaching the priest how to offer each type of offering. Now, how serious is this understanding? Adonai does not tell Moses to speak or to teach Aaron. He tells Moses to Tzav et Aaron, command Aaron. Tzav is a very powerful word. It means to command with a charge that is to be executed with speed and diligence, and is only used for situations that have eternal ramifications. You know, a sacrifice that costs us little means little to God. A handful of flour from a poor man means more to God than the blood of 10 goats offered in indifference or pride out of the abundance of a rich man. And yet, a rich man was required to give only 1 goat. as long as it brought true repentance and obedience. Now, if the price is the same for every sin, and the price must be costly to the person offering the sacrifice, ask yourself this question. When the one offering the sacrifice is the God of all creation himself, what sacrifice is sufficient? There's nothing in creation that God needs. The only thing he could possibly give that would be costly to him is himself. So, in the fullness of time, God offered a sacrifice to end all sacrifices. He gave his only son, Yeshua, the Messiah. He could do no less. And when Yeshua offered himself, it was a sacrifice to end all sacrifices. Unlike the bull, the goat, or the pigeon, Yeshua took on the role of sacrificial offering willingly as an act of obedience and love. And when a man laid his hand upon the animal as a sin sacrifice, he symbolized the transferring of his sin to that animal. The animal symbolically carried only the present sin of the person offering the sacrifice. A new sin required a new animal. And because Yeshua wound up willingly going to his death, he bore the sin of the world, past, present, and future. Yeshua was the best perfect sacrifice. Because that sacrifice was made, it never needs to be made again. It was complete. Yeshua was also the perfect priest, because he sits at the right hand of God, always interceding for those who come to God through him, and it's because his priesthood is permanent. Every earthly priest eventually dies and must be replaced by a successor. Having faced death and been raised to new life, Yeshua lives forever. He takes no breaks, and he has no need for a successor. And here's the final question. Are you going to reject this sacrifice in place of another? Shalom. Until next week's episode of the Nuggets of the Torah.